Hello, welcome to the Efficio Spotlight podcast. My name is Simon Lipscomb and thank you very much for listening. Today, delighted to say that I'm joined by Jay Ferro. Jay is the EVP and Chief Information Technology and Product Officer at Clario, which is one of the world's largest clinical trial organizations. Prior to Clario, Jay has had a varied career with a number of board roles, as well as CIO roles at AIG and the American Cancer Society. Also delighted to say today joined by my colleague Mert Erkan, who is a Vice President at Efficio and has been working with Jay and his team on a recent project. So Jay, thank you so much for joining us today. Real pleasure to have you on the podcast. A good place to start for us and our listeners might be just to understand a bit more about Clario as an organization and more specifically your role within Clario.
Yeah, I have enough titles, don't I?
You do. They're great.
They keep throwing them on there. But first of all, thank you for having me. Mert, great to see you. Simon, great to see you. It's a real pleasure to be here. So first of all, thank you.
Pleasure.
Clario is in the clinical trial digital endpoint space. So we collect evidence to support the efficacy and safety of clinical trials. If you think about the data that is needed to approve a clinical trial as it goes through its life cycle, we enable that with our technology, our science, our consulting, our know-how, and many other things that we bring to the table. So whether that's respiratory or cardiac safety or medical imaging or what's called an electronic clinical outcome assessment or ECOA, we play a role in that entire life cycle of the clinical trial process. So we do business all around the globe and we support trials pretty much in just about every country or nearly every country around the world. So we get excited about what we do and the role we play in it. And I've been here about 3.5 years.
Okay. And Jay, specifically your role, what responsibility do you have within that organization?
So if it's technology, product, or marketing, I play a role in it. My team is really the way they look at my organization is kind of in 3 different areas. The traditional IT, internal, so security, compute, storage, cloud, all of those types of things. That's the CIO role. Yep. Internal support, desktop support. Technology would be anything like product development, enterprise architecture, data and analytics, a number of other functions. So the teams that generally build what we sell or, build the technology that our customers use. And then lastly, product and marketing, which is what you think, product management. So making sure that we're building what our customers truly need and we're listening to our customers all around the world. And then marketing as well. I took on at the end of last year, the beginning of this year. So everything that comes with marketing and the marriage of product and marketing has been fabulously successful so far in 8 months or so, but smaller sample size, but it's gone quite nicely.
Brilliant. And Jay, we're over the moon to have you on the podcast today for lots of reasons, not least of which you're the first CIO that we've ever had on this podcast. So we're very excited about that. Obviously,
very kind. Thank you, Simon.
Predominantly an audience of procurement professionals in places around the world. I think the reason we've got you here is it's fascinating to get your perspective as a CIO. But again, for context, I think you've been through a big transformation in the organization recently, and procurement has played a part in that transformation. So love to start really with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always a little bit weird when it comes to the word transformation, because I think when people hear that, they think it's a big one-time thing, and it's a transformation, meaning there's a beginning and an end. And I think most high-performing companies are in a state of perpetual transformation or continued improvement or continued growth. And that's the way I look at it. But there are key milestones. And when I joined in 2020, we were a company called ERT at the time. We, quite frankly, we're not doing super well on the cybersecurity front. And we had some issues in 2020 that really, I guess, shook customer confidence in our ability to protect. And quite frankly, our customers and our patients and our sponsors deserved better. So at the same time, we were acquiring a company called BioClinica, one of the largest players in the medical imaging space, and bringing these two storied organizations together. So it was a bit of an internal transformation and then a marriage of equals, bringing these companies together, which ultimately would be called Clario in the fall of 2021. So all the things that come along with that, emerging technologies, the merging of contracts, the merging of all of these disparate things that are happening in these two large organizations, which, by the way, were both private equity owned roll-up type companies anyway. So you have these two companies of companies being brought together and all the complexities. at the same time, you're improving and reacting to a cybersecurity incident, which we can talk about separately, but has gone quite well. And we've pivoted tremendously in that space. But look, procurement, the role of procurement in transformation, people maybe don't intuitively think about that, right? As a CIO, if there are CIOs or CTOs listening, they don't right out of the gate go, all right, I have a transformation. I have this big thing.
Yeah.
Let me call my procurement team. And I learned a long time ago that whether I own it or not, a strong partnership with sourcing and procurement is absolutely necessary to get both the efficiencies and the economies of scale that you want out of a transformation, but also just enabling smooth operation of those integrations of an acquisition. You're going through a rescue or revitalization, you're acquiring other companies, whatever it is. When you have friction between the role of technology and procurement, all it does is add internal pressure and slows things down. And so building a strong relationship at that time, right out of the gate, really was super important to me.
And Jay, so you talked about that complex environment of companies coming together into this new entity, Clario. So were you charged with looking at associated business efficiencies, cost reduction efficiencies, and how did you start? Because that must be an incredibly complex environment, particularly from an IT perspective, to think about, right? With duplication all over the place, I'm imagining.
It is. Duplicative technologies, redundant technologies, contracts that made no sense. I mean, just because they maybe came from a smaller organization that was rolled up and was never synthesized or absorbed into a larger enterprise deal or anything like that. So I think the first thing with any kind of transformation is to get a good sense of where you are. Forget about where you're going just for a second. Obviously, you need to know that. But I think the thing that people, whether it's security or infrastructure or whatever in technology, same thing in procurement is, what do I have? And taking stock and inventory of the state of is and having complete transparency about, okay, now what do I have to deal with? And then beginning to prioritize those opportunities, whether it's duplicative Microsoft contracts, duplicative Oracle contracts, you look at multiple instances of Salesforce, and you ask what I was charged with. Certainly, there are always economies of scale that you're trying to take advantage of with a merger. You're looking for those synergy opportunities. I had 2, now I have 1. I had 8, now I have 2. Those types of things right out of the gate are super important to the success of any kind of M&A activity. But I try to look beyond that a little bit, Simon, in that I'm responsible for running the combined organization after all those economies are realized. And so making sure that we're doing it in a mindful way and that we're putting in processes that are repeatable, continually improving, and all of those things, because I have to run it after, the merger is, quote, done. And so making sure that partnership is rock solid and we have line of sight to where our cost levers are. And that's why building that relationship with internal procurement and then leveraging partners like Efficio are so important.
And Jay, just for that, and maybe we can bring Mert in for some perspectives. You obviously worked with Efficio. How did that come about and how was that experience for you?
I didn't know much about Efficio. Certainly I had heard of them not long after I started. And right away, you just knew that you had a strong partner. I got a chance to meet Mert and a number of his colleagues. And, it was just a great onboarding experience. Here I am, this new guy in an industry that is a little bit new, although I had a lot of healthcare experience. The life sciences arena has its own vernacular. I'm doing all the day-to-day things that a CIO does, running the company. And at the same time, trying to do this transformation and acquisition, but having a partner like Mert. And so once I got to know them and saw the quality of the people, kind of partnered with my internal, Matt Denemy comes to mind, who of course is my head of technology sourcing, and he's one of the best in the business. And the combination of he and Mert and Mert's colleagues, I knew I had a pretty powerful weapon in my corner. I really did. You look for wins real quickly when you're thrown into a situation. You have to assess okay, where are my trouble spots, like a heat map? And you're looking and going, all right, I need to focus here, here, and here. And I kind of looked at procurement and I said, I'm going to obviously be crazy involved in that, but I felt real good about the partnership and Efficio right out of the gate.
So I'm assuming from the very kind words you've said, it's been a successful project from your perspective. I mean, maybe to ask you, Mert, what have you seen from the project that have been the components of success?
To Jay's point, I think what is really critical and has been fascinating to see is that commercialization journey between the technology, product, and procurement team as truly being a single unit, single team. Because in a tech-enabled business, first of all, you cannot have what Jay mentioned there, like these 2, 3 different functions. There are gaps and you're slow. You gotta immediately respond to some of these things which have a customer impact at the end. And that's something that has been a continuous focus from Jay and his team. So you got to make sure that speed and quality and capability, either internally or externally with your partners, are in place. And to Jay's other point, which I find it fascinating, it sounds very basic, right? To say, look, we got to know what we own, what we have as of today in front of us. That applies to your cloud estate, that applies to your dozens of applications, that applies to some outsourced partners you're maybe working on, engineering side, data and operations side, and so on. However, what I think we see again and again, and that's why that commercialization journey is key, in my opinion, because technical people, they are stretched and they are dealing with the client requests of day-to-day fires. It is quite actually difficult to go deep and have all those proof points in front of you, right? Like on the cloud, or what you were saying, Jay, on Microsoft, or 10 plus workforce partners we had in place. So that's why it's quite interesting. I think having that depth of information in front of you, you strategize that based on the needs of the technology product team, and you're making conscious decisions based on the data in front of you, benchmarks in front of you. And that's when I think you're optimizing and sustaining that within the organization as well. That's an interesting question, Jay, I have for you. What has been the different components for success in your view across these different areas?
Yeah, look, and you touched on it, Mert. When I walked in, product was very federated, R&D or technology was very federated. And what I mean by that is you had business line executives or other executives that really had their own R&D, their own product, their own all of this other kind of stuff. And it really was an impediment to any kind of Clario one or one Clario view of what we do. And it just caused friction. And it really forced just separation in both our product offerings, so what the customer sees. And by the way, one of the forces in our space is what's called patient or site burden. And it sounds pretty obvious what that might be, but when you're giving them technologies to use every day, whether that's a patient who's going through a trial or a site that's managing the trial, or even a sponsor who is running the trial globally, if we're hard to do business with, that is a big knock against us. And one way that you can be hard to do business with is by having duplicative technologies, different looks and feels, all of that. So it was really obvious to me right out of the gate that we really needed one Clario view and one way to do business with us. So luckily the CEO at the time, and our new CEO, newish now, Chris been here 2 years, but agreed with that. And having a unified product and R&D organization has paid huge dividends, as well as a unified technology group. And going back to Mert's point, that has a knock-on effect all the way down to cloud, your cloud estate, your data centers, the type of database choices you're making, all of those things. So as you're bringing all of this together and saying, we're slowly moving toward a unified tech stack, and I'm a big believer in simplification and standardization, because not just from a cost perspective, although that's super interesting and very important, but it allows me to be nimble. You hear nimbleness and speed and agility all the time. But one way that you become that is by offloading, getting the rocks out of your backpack. And one of the rocks we had, and Mert touched on it, you have 11 ERPs, or, you have duplicative CRMs, you've got 10 different flavors of database. That doesn't allow you to be nimble. I mean, that's an anchor. Each one of those is an anchor around you. And every time you move, you now have to make changes across those. So bringing all of that together, some more quickly than others, was super important. And it has allowed us to be more responsive to our customers. Mert talked about commercialization. When I have a product and marketing and tech group that is unified, listening one time to the customers and taking all of that and seeing across the organization, that is so much more powerful than having a large number of independent groups all kind of fighting their own fires and then hoping they talk to one another behind the scenes. which is just, I think, a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
I would like to come back to one of your good points in terms of you look at transformation as a continuous, as a journey. And clearly, as you said, you have gone through a bit of that during the ERT, and by a Clinica, you haven't stopped. I had visibility around, 3 years, what has been happening at Clario. You had a second big effort to keep driving value. What is your advice on that front? What are the learnings you would like to share?
Stay one step ahead of your boss. No, look, I'm a continual improvement type leader. My leadership team shares that view. I think the work that we're in, and really no matter what work you do, your customers, whoever they are the ones that really are, they're paying the bills, but they deserve your best, right? They deserve your organization's best. They deserve your people's best. And one of the ways you provide that is by continually getting better and not waiting for them always to come and tell you what they need. Anticipating needs, embedding yourselves in what they do each and every day, delighting them. Could be the way you take a phone call, could be the technology, could be you surprise them with a capability they didn't even know they needed, whatever it is. And when you do that, you become sticky and you become the one that sites or sponsors or patients want to use. And certainly we're not a tech-only play, so I am not trying to make this the Jay Ferro show.
Yeah.
I'm blessed with a number of colleagues outside of my organization, whether it's in client success, our science group under the leadership of Dr. Todd Rudo, all of our other, wonderful folks in operations in the business lines who bust their butts every single day, making sure our customers get what they need and our patients are served and our sites are served. But when you have a mindset that you're never really satisfied with where you are, you celebrate wins. So my advice, Mert, to your question is celebrate the wins. Take a pause, look back and realize how far you've come. And then what's the next milestone? Get back to work. And how do you continually just reinvent yourself? There's a concept that I love. It's called profitable mediocrity. And it's based on the concept of what got me here won't get me there. And there have been 1,000 books written about this kind of concept where, what got you to a certain point of success won't always get you to that next level of success. Certainly things like hard work, empathy, leadership, good partnerships with procurement, all of these other things are universal. Those will always be in fashion. You always want to do that. But you have to constantly check yourself against the risk of getting complacent and assuming that the way you're doing things each day continue to work going forward. So my advice is stay humble and stay hungry. How about that?
Jay, that seems great. I mean, conscious of time, this might need to be my last question. You made a really interesting point at the start of our conversation about CIOs looking at this may not automatically think of procurement. I guess to flip that round slightly, a lot of the listeners to this will be procurement people. How should or how could they be going about engaging better with CIOs and the tech community? What's the other side of that?
Well, first of all, I'm really lucky to have great leadership in Matt Denemy and his team here at Clario. So, I started on third base, so to say, meaning that I already had a great leader. Check your ego at the door, both the CIO and the procurement person, and realize that you're both trying to make the organization very, very successful. Yeah. In practical terms, what did that mean for me? It means Matt is part of my leadership team. He doesn't report to me directly. It's a matrix relationship. He reports up through a different organization. But Matt is in my weekly leadership meeting. He's involved in a lot of our strategy sessions. I just had an offsite leadership meeting last week. Matt was there, and procurement has a seat at the table. Now, what does that mean? It means by the time normal companies or other companies get to a procurement decision, Matt is already well-versed. He has the history. He's got the DNA. He's been part of the conversations. He's seen as an equal partner. That doesn't mean he's a rubber stamp. I promise you that. Matt is a tough customer. He has the DNA and he has the intelligence and the knowledge he needs to make an informed decision and partner with us versus vacuum, throw it over the wall to procurement, only to watch it die and ask them a bunch of questions that they could have learned had they been part of the process. So it's been fabulously successful here. Again, to be clear, there are checks and balances. Procurement is a key part of our approval process. And Matt, believe me, and Mert knows this, Matt can be a tough customer, but it really has enabled success. So my advice to the procurement folks out there, first of all, thank you. You have a tough job and you're dealing with guys like me all the time. So I apologize on behalf of CI. But, I know we're throwing a million things at you. But two, just, extend the olive branch and maybe reach across the aisle. And if a CIO or director of IT is listening, do the same and realize that you both have the same goal to see your organization successful, find common shared success criteria that you can both partner with and, knock those walls down. And it sounds so simple, but I have been in many organizations that don't do it. And it just causes wailing and gnashing of teeth for no reason.
Yeah. Jay, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about that journey. Sounds like a fantastically successful project. Mert, thanks also for taking the time to talk to us. It was a real pleasure.
Wonderful to be here, Simon. I really appreciate the opportunity. Mert, thank you. And thank you for your leadership and partnership over the years. Couldn't have done it without you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give us a click on the follow button on your chosen podcast platform. We'd also love to hear your views on either future topics or indeed if you've got any thoughts on future guests that we should look to get onto the podcast. Thanks again. See you next time.